On today's show, it's a big week for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Milwaukee Bucks are in town on Monday night. The Houston Rockets bring Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, and so much more on Wednesday night. An NBA Cup game against the Indiana Pacers, who's left from that team on Friday. And then Ty Lue and the LA Clippers come into town on Sunday night. We're going to talk about all four of those games on this edition of the Locked On Cavs Whip Around.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. And thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. And it's because of you that the Locked On Podcast Network is now the #1 sports podcasting network in America. You can find this show and any other Locked On show anywhere you get your podcasts. That means Apple, that means Spotify, that means anywhere else. We are on YouTube as well. So if you're watching right now, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. In today's show, brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON-NBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Big week for the Cavs. They continue this 6-game homestand. They've got 4 games this week, starting tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks. Camille Davis going to drop by, talk about what's going on in Milwaukee. The Bucks have been kind of up and down since we have last seen them. Giannis Antetokounmpo has been fantastic. The supporting cast has been okay. They're still working in Miles Turner and trying to figure out their fit. So I think that makes for an interesting game on Monday night. Then Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets is going to stop by. We talked about what's going on in Houston. We did speak before they beat the Orlando Magic in overtime on Sunday night, but a lot of good stuff with Jackson as well. And then friend of the show, Tony East, who covers the Indiana Pacers, notably beat the Cavs in the playoffs last year. Well, this is a much different Pacers team than what was playing against the Cavs last spring, because they are maybe the worst team in basketball. They've had a ton of injuries, obviously no Tyrese Haliburton, but so many other guys are missing time as well. Tony has the latest there. And then Darian Vaziri, who does a great job over at Locked On Clippers, talks about what's going on with them. We talked after they lost to the Boston Celtics on Sunday night. Clippers, as of this recording, 4-9 on the season. Certainly not what anybody expected, but maybe they'll be able to get it turned around. Maybe they won't be able to get it to turn around. But really great episode. Very excited about all 4 conversations that I had with some of these local experts to get you ready for another week of Cavs basketball. So now here's my chat with Camille Davis. And the first repeat guest for the Whip Around show this year is Camille Davis, because the Milwaukee Bucks are in town for their second matchup with the Cleveland Cavaliers this season. The Bucks are currently 7th in the Eastern Conference as we sit here and record this on Sunday morning, Camille, and they're coming off of a tough back-to-back where they had an overtime win over the Charlotte Hornets on Friday and then got smoked by the Los Angeles Lakers on Saturday night. Just what have you seen since we've last spoke with this Milwaukee Bucks team?
I've seen the defense kind of fall off a bit. November has not been kind to the Milwaukee Bucks. They've dropped to they were around 17, 18 in defensive rating. I think they're now in the upper 20s after that loss to the Lakers. So the defense has kind of fallen a bit for the Bucks. It's a team that's been very reliant on their offense. They've had one of the better offenses in the league, #1 half-court offense in particular in the league that they've been running with here. And the offense has been really powering them going forward. So that's been like the general sense, but they've had some flaws and some weaknesses that have been showing up, which is part of why I think Doc made the starting lineup change to put Kyle Kuzma in there in place of Gary Trent Jr. to try to get some more size and hopefully fix one of the problems for the Bucks, which has been rebounding in addition to that. So it's been a little up and down. The Bucks on second nights of back-to-backs have not been good this season. So they have to kind of get that conditioning together as well. But ultimately, Giannis has still been looking very much like the Giannis we've seen over the last few years. Somebody who, if the Bucks can stack enough wins, should be in that MVP conversation. But just a month of November so far where it's been like win, loss, and just bouncing back and forth from that and not really able to stack any consistent wins.
This is probably not going to sound the way that I'd like it to sound, but I don't really want to talk about Giannis, because I think we all understand who
Who
Giannis
he
is, how
is.
great
Yes.
he is, right? Like that is it's not a variable to me. Like we know what we're going to get from Giannis Antetokounmpo on a nightly basis. Like the stat line that he put up against the Cavs in their first matchup earlier this year was absurd. And that was really the only reason the Bucks were in that game that the Cavs won. He was my preseason pick to win the MVP. The Bucks just have to win enough games to make that happen. And considering how good he is, I think it's possible. But I am curious from your perspective, how you think this supporting cast around Giannis fits compared to supporting casts of previous years, because this is a different Milwaukee Bucks team than what we've seen over the past several years. And I just want to know so far, and everything is a small sample size. They've played 14 games, so a lot of this can change. But what do you like? What do you not like about the supporting cast around Giannis so far?
I love the fact that they're younger, that they have been better in transition, that this is a team that seems to fit the model of what works around Giannis, which is Giannis plus shooters equals success. And that is how this team is constructed. Like offensively, a lot of it makes sense. I think that they are feeling the absence of Kevin Porter Jr. a bit at this moment because Cole Anthony has been tasked with playing a bigger role. With the emergence of Ryan Rollins, like that's something that has been a very big positive for the Bucks this season. Ryan Rollins is looking like a guy who can start for just about anywhere at this point with his ability on defense, with what he's shown offensively in his game, which has been more of a surprise than the defense at this point. But putting the shooters around Giannis, it works. Having guys who can move their feet on defense, it works. It's just that in execution so far this season, it hasn't been flawless because there are still some hiccups. I think a weakness of the roster has been the fact that they don't really have a playable big wing, which is part of why they try to put Kyle Kuzma in that role now. He had one great game against the Hornets, a not a great showing against the Lakers, and there are going to be concerns with that and how he's utilized when playing on the court next to Giannis. He cannot be a corner sitter. He has to be somebody who's involved in cuts and actions, and you can't just let him sit corner because the other team, that defense wins generally in that situation. So ultimately, I think the makeup of the team makes sense and it's a step in the right direction, but there's still some retooling around the roster to kind of put exactly what you need around this version of the Bucks, where Giannis tries to maximize the shooters and his gravity allows them to get those really good looks offensively.
One of the guys you didn't mention was Miles Turner, who we all know was the big acquisition this summer that Milwaukee made, surprising a lot of people. Now that we've got a little bit of a sample size of him playing for this team, what have your early impressions been so far of him?
Defensively, everything that I was hoping for. One area for the Bucks that we saw a little change against the Lakers in pick and rolls. Miles Turner has been somebody who's been playing up to the level, just consistently up to the level. And at times that can cause some problems of just the scramble of trying to get back and retreat. So you've seen him play a little bit more deep drop against the Lakers. So I'm curious how that carries over. But ultimately on defense, Miles Turner has been everything as expected. I think offensively it has come a little bit slower for him, but he's had some great performances as of late. I just think for Miles, and you've heard him say it, is he has to get used to shooting more. That's just something that he's not used to. But when you're playing with Giannis, it's expected. You catch this and you're open, we want you to shoot it. We don't care if you've already taken 5 threes. We want you to take that 6th and that 7th, as long as they are good looks. So I think that there is still ways for the Bucks to try to utilize Miles Turner a bit better offensively, but he's starting to find his way and understanding, like, I'm just going to have to shoot a lot more than I've been used to in the past. But early returns have been good. Another area I would kind of mark as like keep an eye on is just the rebounding. Like I mentioned before, it's been an area for the team, and Bucks fans used to give Brook Lopez a lot of crap because he never had the raw rebounding numbers of, like, averaging 10 rebounds a game or anything like that. But Brook was a box out beast, and the team always rebounded better when he was on the floor. So rebounding for Miles has to continue to come along, just finding his place offensively, but defensively, he's looked all as advertised, and he looks like a great fit next to Giannis.
I love the phrase "box out beast." I don't know that I've ever heard that before, but that's fantastic. That's one of the best things I've heard when it comes to that. And I do wonder if there's like just this trend of teams trying to crash the glass offensively more than they ever have before. that could be impacting that, because I think there's some of that that's going on with the Cavaliers as well. So as the Bucks enter this week, they're in 7th place in the Eastern Conference right now. I think it's probably fair to assume you expect them to make the playoffs. I expect them to make the playoffs, but what would have to go wrong if they don't make the playoffs, if they have to sneak their way in through the play-in this year, Camille?
Outside of something happening to Giannis, which I think everybody would be like, well, duh. If something happens, all bets are off.
Yes.
But if Giannis is healthy, I think that the biggest problem for the Bucks would be some of the areas of concern we've seen so far early in this season that never get addressed. So the rebounding situation, if they continue to get blitzed on the glass, it's just the margin of error for a team like how the Bucks are constructed isn't large when Giannis is your sole superstar and then everyone else kind of feeds off of that. Like I mentioned, Ryan Rollins has been impressive so far with what he's been able to do. And I think when Kevin Porter Jr. comes back, it'll add to the team. But rebounding is one. The defense, they just have not been good defensively. Part of that is because they've been fouling a lot as well. They've been trying to set the tone of like, we're a physical defense too. Like, we're going to put our hands on people and we're going to do this. And refs are like, no, you're not. And they're blowing the whistle every single time, it feels like. So the fouls, the rebounding, I think that's like your biggest concerns. And then just the utilization of the guys on your roster. All bench lineups have been tanking so far this season. And Doc has been kind of experimenting with that too. So the big three: rebounding, fouling, and then I would say rotation, just making sure we're not getting killed in the minutes where Giannis is not on the floor.
Well, it should be an interesting one on Monday night as the Cavs look to kind of snap out of their own funk and the Milwaukee Bucks look to rebound from what was a second night of a back-to-back loss against the Lakers on Saturday night. But if you want more Milwaukee Bucks coverage, Locked On Bucks is the place to go with Camille Davis. Camille, thank you so much for doing this.
For sure, anytime.
Big thanks to Camille for stopping by, and Jackson Gatlin on the way in a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match. With Robinhood, you play for the win, not just on game day, but every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more out of yourself, so expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that is Robinhood, ROBINHOOD.com/your, YOUR money. Your money, your move. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. The NBA season is the best part of the year, if you ask me, because there are so many NBA games to go to. And what are we talking about on today's show? All the home games in Cleveland this week. There's 4 of them. Tonight, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. You're going to want to be in the building. Maybe you want to check out the City Edition stuff. That is on Monday night. Maybe you want a Classic Edition game. That's Wednesday night. Maybe you want to see the Cavs beat the team that beat them in the playoffs. That's going to be Friday night when the Pacers come to town. If you want to get in the building, Game Time is the way to go. Game Time takes the headache out of buying tickets because there's no waiting in queues. There's no surprise fees. The price not going to jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all those things happen because all you want to do is be in the building and watch your favorite team. Game Time gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack to scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and most importantly, stress-free. So make sure that you take the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the code is LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. And for the first time of 2 matchups, the Cleveland Cavaliers will take on the Houston Rockets this week. The Rockets come to Cleveland for the first time, featuring Kevin Durant and Jackson Gatlin here to talk about all of it. And last year, Jackson, the Cavs played the Rockets twice in a week. I believe it was back-to-back games for the Rockets. The Cavs had a game mixed in between. And prior to that, you came on this show and we talked about things. And one of the things that I remember you saying is that the Houston Rockets are the passenger princess to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference. And a year later, how do you feel about where the Rockets are in their ascension towards the top of the West?
You know, I think that if you would ask me this question pre-Fred VanVleet injury, I would have absolutely said it's basically the same thing, right? It's OKC in their own tier, and I felt very confident that with a healthy Fred VanVleet, this Rockets team was in its own tier right after the OKC Thunder. But given the severity of the Fred VanVleet injury, kind of the uncertainty about what this team will look like when it's dealing with some of these more high-powered defenses, the teams that can turn them over and really apply that ball pressure. We've seen it a couple times already against the Thunder on opening night, against the Spurs, a lot of turnovers, a lot of issues getting in and out of their sets offensively. I think right now this Rockets team is still absolutely a championship caliber team. They just have some things that they have to figure out, and a lot of that is going to ride on the X factor that is Reed Shepherd this season, how much he can develop. Can he become the kind of the floor general that this Rockets team needs him to be able to grow into at a bit of an accelerated rate, unfortunately, because of the Fred injury. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that they're the passenger princess to the Thunder again this season, but I think it's very clearly the Thunder are still in their own tier. I think it's the Nuggets with a little bit of an edge over the Rockets right now, but the Rockets are firmly, I think, the third best team in the West right now.
I would certainly agree with all of that. And I think that there's a bigger gap between the Rockets and whoever you want to put at number 4, whether it's the Lakers, the Spurs, maybe Minnesota, maybe Golden State, then there is 2 and 3 between Denver. So I'm with you as far as that goes. But you brought up a name that I find to be very interesting and I think very polarizing in Reed Shepherd. And I think that he is thrust into maybe a little bit of a bigger role than imagined, given the Fred VanVleet injury that you mentioned earlier. But what have you seen so far from him in the first 11 games that Houston has played?
Tell you what, in those first few games, it looked a little rough defensively. Like that was kind of the issue, and kind of the big question mark is there hasn't really been a worry about will Reed's offense translate, right? He's shooting the lights out of the ball right now, mid-40s from downtown. The shooting has finally translated. It didn't quite look, where we thought it would look during his rookie season, but he got such infrequent minutes, and the opportunities weren't really there for him to get a consistent role in the offense. But this season, the first handful of games looked really rough defensively. He was a liability for this Rockets team defensively at times. But then he started to settle in, and now he's better recognizing certain defensive coverages, where he needs to be, how he needs to rotate. He's getting better at dealing with the physicality of other teams trying to target him defensively. And he's got so many other good defenders, high-level defenders around him that the Rockets are able to, I guess, insulate him a little bit defensively. Think like Steph Curry earlier in his career, how the Warriors had to hide him occasionally on defense. That's kind of what the Rockets are in a position of having to do sometimes. They run probably a little bit more zone defense than they would probably like to, in part because when they run zone, it prevents other teams from targeting Reed Shepherd, singling him out and trying to go after him. But he's picked things up very quickly. Now you're starting to see the quick hands that were so proficient in college, where he was able to get all these stocks, these steals, these blocks. You're starting to see that translate now at the NBA level, where he's not your prototypical, wall you off kind of defender, but if he does get beat, he's doing a great job recovering on some of those actions. And so far, it's been really encouraging through 11 games.
So with all of that said, and given the injury to FVV and given, what maybe we see from Reed Shepherd, do you think that the Rockets are going to be a team that needs to make a trade in order to reach their full potential this year?
Not to give a cop-out answer, but it's too early to tell, right? There's a level of, if Reed continues to grow exponentially this season, there's an argument to be made that he could be inserted into the starting lineup at some point this year. And if that happens, then I feel like the Rockets are in a position where they feel pretty confident with him as either their primary ball handler or at least, a secondary or tertiary ball handler, because the offense is still primarily going to be run through Alperen Sengun, Kevin Durant. Those guys are still going to get a majority of the touches. But if Reed continues to grow, gets to a place where he is kind of that safety, that safety harness, if you will, where he's the guy who's able to walk the ball up and prevent these turnovers and get them in and out of sets as the floor general, then no, they're not going to be in a position where they need to kind of do a, break glass in case of emergency type of trade to be competitive or to make a deep run this season. So a lot of it does hinge on what Reed Shepherd's development looks like. And again, through 11 games, there's a lot of encouraging signs that say this Rockets team won't have to make some kind of an emergency trade to be able to have a deep postseason run.
What has the Kevin Durant experience been like so far in Houston?
It's been nuts, man. I only had the opportunity to cover a top 5, top 10 player for one season before the Rockets hit the trenches and kind of were in their dark days for a little while there. It's a certain luxury that you kind of maybe take for granted when you are covering one of the best players in the NBA. He's an absolute cheat code offensively. He had one game earlier this season where maybe it was one of the preseason games, he started 0 for 3, 0 for 4, and then he hit his next 7 shots in a row. Just didn't miss one. And like, that's the kind of offensive player that KD is. And one thing that stands out that's so important that I want to highlight here is like, there's this narrative that has followed KD for his whole career. He's not a good leader. He's not a good locker room guy, whatever. And through these first, like this early little stint with the Rockets, he's been the complete antithesis of that. He is a phenomenal leader for these young guys. He is pouring so much into the young guys, empowering Alperen Sengun, empowering Amin Thompson. One of the best storylines of the season so far has been the little like kind of buddy cop duo between Kevin Durant and Reed Shepherd, who, you know, Reed Shepherd really struggled with his confidence at points last season. And so being thrust into this bigger role now by necessity due to the Fred VanVleet injury, there are a lot of expectations being placed on Reed's shoulders, and KD has been phenomenal about encouraging him, hyping him up whenever he does anything good on the court. If KD's out there with Reed Shepherd and Reed does something positive, KD is like the first guy who goes up to him, he's dapping him up, he's hitting him on the chest, pushing his head around saying, good job, good job. And that means so much when you have a first ballot Hall of Famer encouraging you, giving you that motivation, and it really is paying dividends for Reed Shepherd in his play so far.
I'll get you out of here with this, but given the injury to Fred VanVleet, and I just think given the guy's natural progression, there's been more on Amen Thompson's plate so far this season for the Rockets. How do you think he's handled that higher usage in Houston?
Bit of a mixed bag, and it's tough because Amen is so elite as like a connective tissue piece, and he's so adept at playing off the ball that by putting him on ball, you're taking away one of the Rockets' best weapons. And it's one of those things where they're sacrificing here in the short term to get him that on-ball equity so that he can one day be a more confident, comfortable on-ball player. It's mixed bag because there's some games where he's really strong, the drives look good, and he's finishing, you know, in that kind of that short game around the rim, that like 5 to 8 foot range, the floaters look good, all that stuff. And then he has games where he just really struggles, where the half-court offense looks a little rough around the edges, or, you know, there's some, you know, some higher turnover games, that kind of thing. I think it's tough because they're having to balance the identity of, you know, we know he's really elite playing off ball, but we need him to get those on-ball reps in order to get us where we want to be this season. Again, in large part due to, you know, the situation being exacerbated by the Fred VanVleet injury. So with all that, I think that you have to be encouraged by some of what we've seen from him, but there's still plenty of room to grow.
Well, we will see just how much growth he's taken since the Cavs last played the Houston Rockets on Wednesday night when the Rockets come to town. Jackson, thanks so much for the time, man.
Always a pleasure, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Big thanks to Jackson for stopping by. Going to have conversations with Tony East coming up and then Darian Vaziri after him. But first, today's show brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you missed the start of the game, which, hey, maybe you do. You got stuff going on sometimes. Totally get it. You don't have the opportunity to put in that pregame bet. Well, FanDuel's got you covered, because if you do that, or maybe you just want to ride the hot hand, maybe you don't necessarily know how a game's going to play out, but the first 5 minutes might tell you otherwise. FanDuel's got live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks, futures, so much more. You've got game lines, totals, everything you could imagine. FanDuel has that, and then even some more after that. You can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for your shot at a bigger payout, too. Maybe you think the Cavs are going to beat the Milwaukee Bucks on Monday night. Maybe you think Donovan Mitchell is going to go for over 30 points in that game. That's been his average so far. Could see that being the case on Monday night. You can combine those two things for a bigger payout. You can do that once the game starts, or as you're listening to this right now, prior to the game. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is the one that's making that late push like the Cavs did on Saturday night against the Memphis Grizzlies. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. Yes, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do, win your first $5 bet, $300 in bonus bets are yours. So head to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Tony East back and talking about a much different Pacers team than the last time he and I spoke. Last time was in the postseason as Indiana beat the Cavs in the second round, went all the way to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. They, of course, lost Tyrese Haliburton to a torn Achilles, who will not play this year. And now you look at the standings, and the Pacers are the worst team in basketball with a 1-12 record as we record this on Sunday afternoon. So, Tony, aside from the Haliburton stuff, what has happened to the mighty Indiana Pacers this year?
Well, what hasn't happened to the mighty Indiana Pacers? My God, they're out of every player. I mean, they just played last night. They played the Toronto Raptors here in Indy, missing 7 guys. I think throughout the season, if you count every injury they've had, 11 of their 18 guys at some point have missed some amount of time, and a lot of them are key players. TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Miles Turner is on the Bucks. I don't know if you heard. Aaron Nesmith is now out. Andrew Nembhard missed time. Ben Matherin's missed every game except for their first game. I could go on and on and on. Like, at some point, it just becomes a critical mass of, every team, you've been around the NBA for a while, every time someone gets hurt, they say, next man up. They're out of next man. They don't have a next man to do the next man up thing. So they're just guessing with what lineups to do. And like Jay Huff is playing the 4 and Ben Shepherd's playing point guard. And, they just can't make anything. They're having like the worst shooting season in like years. So it's all been horrible. And Haliburton's absence is part of it. But also, like, their collection of talent can play better than this. And they just aren't. They are a miserable bunch right now.
So you mentioned they can play better than they have. And I would agree with that because I look at, and I understand all the injury stuff, and I think that everybody does. But I look at the rest of that roster, Tyrese Haliburton aside, and I think I thought before this season, the Pacers are going to be better than people think they will, just because they've got they don't have guys when they're healthy that you look at and say, that guy's just not a good NBA player. Like, they have a lot of good NBA players, even if they're missing a star. I thought they'd be somewhere between 35 and 40 wins. So for the guys that have been healthy, what hasn't worked for them?
Yeah, it's strange. Like, last year, without Haliburton, they were 4-5, I think. And then without Haliburton and Turner, they were like a 500 team. And, that was a small sample of games. But it's like, yeah, I've seen this collection do well in the past. And I thought they'd win like 40 games this year. And they can't score, man. Like, it's pathetic how bad their offense has been for a team that's been so dynamic. And they came in and said, our style is what got us to this point. We're going to be ourselves and it's going to work. And okay, I guess that makes sense. Like, you want to keep cultivating this for when you're good again. And then they can't even play that way because they have so many guys out and new guys who don't know how to do it. And like, they're at a point where even guys who are good at their style aren't available. So they can't play any certain way on the offensive end. They're generating just like a contested Cody Martin corner 3 or a pull up Ray J Dennis 3. It's like, it's shots that are fine. They're not like horrible or unopened, but it's just like, that is the shot, a result of these possessions. There's a viral chart in the land of the Pacers of the effective field goal percentage of every team in the league. And they're all like trending down a little bit. And the Pacers are way, way, way down below everybody else. Like, they can't make anything. And so that's part of what's weird is in some cases, like, now they're getting healthier. McConnell's back, Nembhard's back, right? Like, it's guys who have made shots before and just aren't. Jarris Walker is like, can't make anything. Ben Shepherd cannot make anything. Those guys played well against the Cavs, for example, last year in the playoffs. I know those specific players can play better. Jay Huff made 40% of his threes before the season. He can't make anything, right? That's part of it. But the other part of it is they're all playing a different role, a bigger role, more responsibilities, whatever, however you want to define it. And that's making their shots just a little harder. They've already signed 3 hardship contracts. Like, it's just a mess of cohesion and guys all collectively being like, I have no confidence. I'm going to play horrible.
So this might be a tough question considering everything that you've already said, considering where they're at in the standings, considering what their record is as of right now. But have there been bright spots? Like, is there anything you look at, Tony, and just say, you know what, everything is bad, but there's this one thing that I say that could be eventually when the Pacers get back to being the Pacers, that could be a useful thing that they're discovering right now.
Dude, no, like, not really. Okay, Tony Bradley is like solid. He thought I predicted he'd be their camp cut and not make the team, and he's starting at center now, and it's like the right choice. Like, he's solid. He moves pretty well. He gets some rebounds. He's smart. They added Jeremiah Robinson Earl on a hardship 10-day twice, and he's also starting, which again says a lot about their team at this point in the season. But he's actually been pretty good. He's a really good rebounder and defender for his size. He, like the rest of the team, cannot make any shot at all. But he's been capable-ish. That's part of what's made this challenging for the Pacers is like if you lost a lot of good players, most teams would be like, whatever, we'll just develop. But that's who they've also lost. Like Johnny Furphy, Cam Jones, Haliburton, Nembhard, Toppin, Nesmith, tons of guys they've lost are also young. And like guys they would take a long look at. Quentin Jackson, Taylor Peter got hurt, Matherin, obviously. That's who they would want to look at if they're really banged up. They can't even do that. That's why it's so challenging to find bright spots is the only 2 young guys who have played a lot of games or every game are Shepherd and Walker. They've both had bad seasons. So it's really hard to be like, oh, yes, this is a thing that they can be like, well, thank God we discovered this in these 13 games. Like, Taylor Peters, kind of good for a two-way player. And Tony Bradley and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl should probably stick around. That's kind of it. I mean, I'm not even kidding. That's kind of it.
So you said you expected the Pacers to be around 40 wins. I expected them to be somewhere in that ballpark, obviously, prior to all of this happening. Knowing what we know now, what do you think is more likely? The Pacers get to 30 wins or the Pacers finish with the worst record in basketball?
Golly. Well, I
I'm
don't
here
think
to ask the tough questions, Tony.
I know. Well, the problem is worst record's really unlikely because the Nets and Wizards are so bad. And Pascal Siakam is still on the Pacers and playing pretty well, but 30 also seems just so super unobtainable. Like, I do the record game by game. So I can tell you like what I had them at every point. And I had them at 6-7 right now. Right? Like, they have one win, so they're already 5 wins behind. And winning 35 is pointless for them. They should either win 40 and see what this non-Haliburton group can do in the playoffs and learn something from that, or just be bad and get the best pick you can. And I think that the end of the NBA Cup, this is a Cup game, so I can bring it up, is like, last year they were 10-15 and they had this gap. Everybody has that practice time who doesn't go to Vegas, and they turned their season around. Then they were like, their record was as good as the Cavs, for example, the rest of the season from that point on. They were awful to start the season. And so that's like a good reassessment time. So their record's going to be bottom 5 when that comes. It just is. They're not very good. If they come out of that and their first 5 games, they just suck, I think they'll be like, okay, what are we doing? Like, we've been given the chance to do the Steph-less Warriors thing and get the second pick or whatever. I mean, that's just lottery luck, but like that is potentially on the table. So I think, honestly, we'll know in a month from today of you and I talking, we'll know what the Pacers have decided. But I would say more likely, I'll say 30 wins is more likely, like 5% to 4%, but it's both are on the table, which is crazy.
Well, nobody saw this coming for the Indiana Pacers, certainly. But if you want to follow it every step of the way, Locked On Pacers is your place to go, as well as Circle City Spin, Tony's latest venture. I promise you want to check it out. He's one of the best there is. Tony, thank you so much for doing this. Can't wait to see you on Friday, man.
And Danny laughs at all my datelines, so you all can laugh at them too if you check it out.
That is absolutely true. I will put a link to that in the show description. So if you want to learn about the misery of the Indiana Pacers, that's the place to go. Tony, thanks so much. And the LA Clippers make their only trip to Cleveland on Sunday. The Clippers not gotten off to a great start to the season so far, but we bring in our guy Dime Dropper, Darian Vaziri from Locked On Clippers, to talk about what the start of the season has been so far. And Darian, we're talking after the Clips lost to the Celtics this Sunday before they play the Cavs, to fall to 4-9 on the season, currently on the outside looking in. Very early, obviously. Standings don't matter at this point so much, but what have you seen so far from the Clippers that's maybe a little bit different than what we all expected them to look like before the season began?
It's really been the worst nightmare possible where we're just an old team. We're just a very old team. Kawhi Leonard has gotten hurt early on in the season, and now Bradley Beal is out for the season. So trading away Norman Powell, who was such an important part of the team, we traded him for John Collins to add some more size around Kawhi, but then also got Bradley Beal to help kind of fill in that Norman Powell role. But now Bradley Beal's been out for the season, and you could kind of predict that his health would be a little bit unreliable coming into it. So without Bradley Beal, without Kawhi Leonard, and then the other big disappointment has been Chris Paul. You saw Chris Paul start 82 games last year in San Antonio, and now he hasn't even been a rotation player. Now, you could argue that Ty Lue kind of pulled the plug on him a little bit early after not even 10 games, but he was really, really bad, not even able to create any advantages that we're used to seeing in pick and rolls or whatever it may be. So now without Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, and Kawhi Leonard, the Clippers are very short of shot creation, and it puts a lot on James Harden's plate. And without Norman Powell, it's been really tough. And also, Ivica Zubac has not looked as good this year as well early on. So that's tough because he was such a big part of what we did last year. So it's been a real nightmare so far, Danny. And hopefully Kawhi Leonard comes back and kind of saves the day soon.
When, if soon, do you expect Kawhi to be back? I know that anytime Kawhi gets hurt, There always seems to be like this mystery surrounding it where you don't exactly know what the injury is. You don't know how severe it is. It's always shrouded in mystery. And even this one, I think it was said it was an ankle sprain, and then it's also a foot sprain. And I don't know that we necessarily have all the answers, but when do you expect him to be on the floor for the Clippers again?
I've been hearing at the end of the week. So hopefully at the end of the week against Charlotte.
We'll have to wait and see, and that'll be obviously something that could affect the game on Sunday against the Cavaliers. And James Harden has certainly done some good things, but as you mentioned, there's a lot on his plate right now. You mentioned John Collins, the guy that's come in, but this is a team that I'm curious from your perspective. Are they just kind of who they are, or are there things that you think that can be done differently to sort of change what this group is as the season rolls along, provided that the health, and I know Bradley Beal's not coming back, but provided that the health in some other areas gets better?
There can be some things that can be done. John Collins can play more. He was brought in to be a big body around Zoo and to help Kawhi Leonard not have to guard bigger guys. For example, against a team like Cleveland, Kawhi Leonard would have to be guarding like an Evan Mobley. That's not necessarily ideal, especially at his age and with the mileage that he has on his body. So John Collins would really help that out. He hasn't been used very frequently the way we thought he would be used, given how much he's getting paid, $26 million dollars a year, and the fact that we traded Norman Powell for him. So I figured he would get more playing time. I think he's starting to get more playing time now that he's been declared a starter. And then I think we could, now that Bradley Beal's out, we can lean more into Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. getting more minutes, because last season they were a huge reason why the Clippers were third in defensive rating, and we've been awful to start the year defensively. Giving them more minutes might be able to increase our, defensive tenacity and our ball pressure and stuff like that. And I think Zubats will, return to what we saw last year. I just may take a little bit of time. I think the team at times is still resistant to get the ball to Zoo in the post, and that can be frustrating at times as well. But there are some ways the Clippers can get better for sure. And then if Kawhi comes back, then they can be legit again.
Yes, I certainly would agree with that. And when Bradley Beal went out, I want to ask your opinion on this because I think that you have a strong one. It was certainly a quote that caught me by surprise. But when Bradley Beal earlier this past week, they said he needs hip surgery, he's going to miss the rest of the season. Ty Lue called him the third best player on the Clippers, which I raised my eyebrows, certainly as an Ivica Zubac respecter. I thought that is very much not who Bradley Beal is at this point. What was your reaction to those comments from Ty Lue?
Shocking, but honestly very telling, because there's been a huge complaint for years that we don't give the ball to Zoo enough in the post and we don't involve him enough. And hearing that from Ty, who's I've always felt more of an offensive centric or a guard centric coach, given that he was a guard and just that's the way he kind of views the game. To consider Bradley Beal the third best player on the team in 2026, I mean, that kind of tells us why maybe Zubats doesn't get the touches that we think he should get sometimes in the post and all that kind of stuff. So I was pretty disappointed to hear that, because Bradley Beal, a very good player, has had a great career. We saw what happened in Phoenix. For him to be considered the third best player on the team by you, maybe he was forgetting about Zoo. Maybe he was just trying to be generous to Brad. It was disappointing.
Yeah, it was certainly surprising to see, just considering just how good Ivica Zubac has been in a Clippers uniform. And I'll get you out of here with this, but considering the start that the Clippers have gotten off to, and I'm not sure exactly what your preseason expectations were for this team. I thought that they would be a team that would be fighting for home court advantage and potentially a better playoff team than a regular season team because of some of the ages of guys on that roster. I just thought that it was maybe a roster built better for 16 games than 82 games. But now that they've started off 4-9, have your expectations for this group changed at all? And if so, what are they?
Absolutely. I don't know about a top three seed anymore. I was being a little optimistic. Thought maybe we can pull off a top three seed just given the depth that we have. I didn't expect a player to be out for the season so early. And now it's kind of just like hopefully we can get back into the playoff spots and make a case to be a playoff team in that top six, because top three, top four seed is probably out of the question. This has been our worst start, Danny, since 2010-11, before Chris Paul even joined the team for Lob City. So it's been rough. Hopefully they can turn it around. I'm afraid that James Harden's body's not going to hold up. I think maybe we should look at Chris Paul getting some burn again, just because he could maybe, if he does play well, mitigate some of that offensive load that Harden has to carry. But recently we've seen rookie Kobe Sanders get some burn. He's actually been pretty good, but he's still a rookie. He's still going through those growing pains. It just changes the expectations of our team entirely. So I'm just hoping we can make the playoffs at this point. But then there's another voice inside my head that's saying, if it goes really, really badly, maybe the front office will finally change things up and we can go a different direction, which is what I've been wanting for a long time. But it's just that the pick situation isn't good because this era is cooked, in my opinion. But the pick situation isn't good, so it makes it hard to pivot away from it.
Well, let me ask you this. If they do change up and go a different direction, what would you want that to look like?
Anything but this, honestly. Like no more. Like Harden and Kawhi would have to be. I'm actually serious. Harden and Kawhi would have to be gone. Harden's done some great things for the Clippers, but he's honestly one of the most valuable assets they have right now because I think he could really help a team out depending on what they need. He's still a shot creator extraordinaire. He's a pick and roll god. He's still capable of going for 20 to 30 every single night. But I just am ready for something new, something we could believe in, even if it takes a long time. I'm used to us losing. I was a fan when we were 19 and 63, and 23 and 59, 2 straight seasons. So I'm not opposed to going through some tough times again to get back to the top. But the question is, does Steve Ballmer and the front office want to do that? Especially when we just opened up a new stadium. That's where there's resistance. And plus, without the picks, it makes it kind of hard to pivot as well.
That is all very true stuff, and we will see what the Clippers look like. Maybe Kawhi Leonard will be back in the lineup on Sunday when they're in town to take on the Cavs. Darian, thanks so much for the time, man. Very much
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Big thank you to Camille over at Locked On Bucks, Jackson over at Locked On Rockets, Tony at Locked On Pacers, and of course, Darian over at Locked On Clippers. Make sure if you're looking for anything else from those teams, check out their shows each and every day. All four of them do a great job covering their teams in their own ways. And thank you for making this edition of Locked On Cavs maybe your second listen of the day. I know that you probably already checked out Monday morning's first edition of Locked On Cavs. If you missed that, make sure you go find it wherever you get your podcast. It's Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And please, as we're getting out of here, hit that thumbs up button on YouTube, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about the Cavs taking on the Milwaukee Bucks.